Hey Meeple people, and on today's vlog, we are playing, how do you say it?
Tutankhamun.
Tutankhamun by 25th Century Games. Let's get into it.
The great King Tutankhamun has passed, and arrangements are being made to fill his tomb with artifacts that will travel with him to the afterlife. Prepare to collect your offerings and cleanse your spirit as you take on the role of priests and priestesses, traveling down the Nile River to gather artifacts for the great king's tomb. Along the way, enchanted idols from the mighty Egyptian gods may assist you on your journey.
Hey everybody, how's it going? Right now, Sarah's going to go ahead and tell us a little bit of how you play Tutankhamun. So let's get into it.
Hi there. This is Tutankhamun. It is a 2 to 6 player game where we are attempting to help the late Tutankhamun prepare for his journey into the afterlife by collecting various artifacts which we'll be placing into his tomb. And every artifact set that we collect the most of, we will get to cleanse our spirit that number of points. And the first player to completely cleanse their spirit, or the player to have cleansed as like the most of their spirit by the end of the game, wins. So it's a point shedding game. We start with 30 points and we're trying to lose points as we go. And like I said, either the first player to get to 0 points, or if the game were to end by way of us running out of tiles, the player who has the fewest points at the end of the game wins. So the way that it's going to work is we are going to sail down the Nile using these little boat pieces right here. And as we sail, we're going to be collecting artifacts. And there's a couple different things going on with these artifacts. There is a number on the artifact. That's the number of points that it's worth should you collect the most of this type of artifact. So when we score this type of artifact, if you have the most, then you will get to shed 4 points from your score. It is also the number of this type of artifact there are in the whole river. So there are 4 of these sort of jars. And once all 4 of them have been removed from the river, we'll go ahead and score for that set. And players will move down this track over here in anti-clockwise order. There are all different kinds of artifacts, and they're worth varying numbers of points, and they have varying numbers of pieces in each set. For example, there's 8 of these, there's 6 of these, there's 4 of these, and so on. There are also these scarab rings right here. I think there's 10 of these. These work a little bit differently. You immediately shed a point when you pick up a scarab ring, and then the player who has the most scarab rings when all the scarab rings have been picked up out of the Nile, that player gets a bonus 5 points. Then we also have, in addition to the scarab rings and the standard artifacts, we also have some god tiles, and they're these kind of god-looking pieces. So these are all representative of Egyptian gods, which have different powers, which will be granted to the player who collects that piece. They all do different things, and they're all sort of interesting ways to sort of manipulate the river, and that kind of thing. So on your turn, like I said, on your turn, you take your little boat and you move it along the river. Now, you can move it as far down the river as you want, but you want to be a little careful because you can only go backwards just a little bit at a time. So you move your boat piece down the river. I'm going to actually go here to this number 8 piece. So I'm going to pick the piece up out of the river and I'm going to put my little boat piece there. Now I've started working on attempting to collect this set of artifacts right here. So hopefully when all of these artifacts have been picked up out of the river, I have the most. If I do have the most, I will shed 8 points from my score. And then that's my turn. I end my turn here, and then it's the next player's turn. So perhaps Nick would want to go here, and he picks this up. He would immediately shed a point because this is a scarab ring, so he immediately sheds a point, and then he would put this into his collection. Now we have a situation where there are pieces behind the player who is in last place. So this piece right here, this is actually going to go away, and this will be removed to the underworld, which is a section that these 2 sort of statues are watching over. And this counts towards those sets. So if, for example, we were to score the number 4 pot set right now, what we would do is we'd look to see who has the most, but there's a chance that the underworld might have more pieces than another player. So for example, let's say that Nick had 2 of the 4 pots, I had 1 of the 4 pots, and 1 of the 4 pots was in the underworld. Well, in that case, Nick would have the most, clearly with 2, so he'd score 4 points. Now, technically, the player who comes in second would score half of the number of points, but since I was tied with the underworld with with each of us having only 1 tile each, then I wouldn't get any points for that. Now, I believe this does work a little bit differently. In the higher player counts, this game can go from 2 to 6 players. So this works a little bit differently as a 2-player game, but that's what we're going to play today. So that's what I'm talking about today. And so that would be Nick's turn. He moved up, he took a piece, everything behind him fell away since he's the last player in line. Then it would be back to me. I would do something. I could move just 1 space forward and take this god token here if I want to, triggering the ability here. I could move backwards if I want to and take this space right here. Or I could move forward again as far down the river as I want to. Just you have to keep in mind you can't really come back very far. And we would continue going back and forth until either one player has shed all 30 of their points or until we've completely resolved the entire river. And then it would be whichever player is closest to having no points. That player would win at that point. And I think that covers all the basics.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's a pretty simple, interesting game. And one thing before we get into playing that I want to mention is as we're going up and collecting all of these treasure artifacts and god tokens, eventually when we be scoring them, we'll be throwing them back into this cute little this is actually the box part of the box, so we're actually cleaning up the game while we're playing, because when we score or use the god tiles, they will be thrown back into the box lid here. And that's just it's pretty smart, because then all of a sudden you can just shelf everything back up and start playing again.
We played a practice game the other day, and when we were finished, there were no tiles left on the board because they were all in the box, and we just had to like pick up like these things and like our little boats and the like little player aids, and that was it. Everything else was already picked up because we picked up as we played.
And then you could just play again. All right, well, let's go ahead and jump into it, and we'll get back to you guys midway through the game. So yeah, see you all in a sec. Hey, Maple people, and we're back at it, talking about, oh my gosh, Sarah, how do you say it?
Tutankhamun.
Tutankhamun. I'll get it right someday. But yeah, I don't know from the board view so far who's winning, but let's go talk with Sarah and see what she thinks. So what do you think, Sarah? How's it going so far on your side of the board in Tutankhamun?
I think it's going pretty well. I have 4 of the 8 tablets and 3 of the 8 sort of ancient board games. I also have 4 of the 10 rings, and a few other random things. So I feel like I'm doing pretty good. In a 2-player game, it's interesting because you have to always keep track of what's in the underworld as well. Because, for example, if I were to pick up this number 4 pot right here, we would score those pots because Nick has 2 of them and there's one in the underworld, and I would pick up the 4th one. But in doing that, I essentially would tie with the underworld and I wouldn't get any points. So I definitely don't want to do that because it would kind of be a waste of a turn. So you have to kind of keep track of almost like a phantom player or like an Onitama sort of player over here, but in a way that's not as involved, thank you, as some other Onitama players. So that's nice because I usually don't really
Are you
prefer...
talking about an autonomous player?
An Autonoma?
And yeah, okay. It sounded like you were saying Onitama.
No, like an Autonoma player or an autonomous player.
Okay.
Sometimes board games will integrate an Autonoma or an autonomous player for 2-player games so that it sort of simulates a 3rd player.
And they ruin it.
And I really don't care for that experience very often.
It very rarely works out in their favor.
Exactly. So, but for me, this feels like we have almost like an Autonoma player, but the upkeep, the maintenance, the bookkeeping, that kind of thing, it's just like almost non-existent for that. So that's an interesting part of the game. What do you think, Nick?
I think I'm doing all right. I feel like I have a lot bigger spread out there, and sometimes I just make sure I have more than the underworld, so I can go ahead and get that those second place points. So yeah, it's gonna be interesting. There was our previous games. Have been further down the track, but I ended up losing because I wasn't able to set off all of my stuff, and that's another interesting thing you have to be wary of this game is, you might have some big, like, you might be in the lead with some number eights, but if they don't score until like towards the end, but your other player's already almost at the zero mark, then it doesn't matter. So it's an interesting balance in this game because you're paying attention, at least in a two-player game, to yourself, your opponent, and the underworld. So I feel like it's pretty interesting. I like it. I like how it cleans up itself. For some reason I'm just amazed that like you're cleaning up the game while you're playing and it doesn't really even feel like that, which is like just awesome because then you can go ahead and play again. But yeah.
One of the things that I think is neat about the strategies is that if ever there's a tie, then the player who's the furthest behind on the river breaks the tie. So if, for example, let's just pretend, for example, let's pretend that this was the last ring right here. And let's pretend that Nick has one more ring than I do at this point. If I jump way far ahead and I collect this ring so that we would score the rings, I would immediately get a point because that's what the rings do. But then if we had an equal number of rings, then Nick, because he's the furthest behind, would actually get to score those 5 extra points for having the bonus of the ring. And the regular sets work the same way too. So if, for example, I jumped ahead to this one right here and we ended up tied on this, then Nick would score the full 6 points and I would only get 3 because the tiebreak is always the player sort of in the last position along the river. So that's a really interesting part of the strategy as well, because you think, okay, if I just run ahead and grab a bunch of stuff, then theoretically I'll get a lot of points. But if there's ever a tie break for anything, even including like at the end of the game, if we need a tie break, then it's that player who's in the very last part of the river. So you have to kind of be careful not to just like speed ahead, because then you might end up screwing yourself out of points that you're the one who did all the work to collect those items. But if your opponent would tie with you, then like they get an equal number of points too, and they didn't have to like rush ahead. So that's an interesting part of the game as well.
Cool. Well, you want to jump back in?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's go ahead and jump back in and find out who's going to be the winner or loser of Tutankhamun by 25th Century Games. Let's do it. Hello, Maple people. And I lost. And yeah, this is I think I'm on a streak right now of losing, but yeah, this is Sarah's win yet again. So she is the winner of cleansing her soul. So let's go to Sarah and see what she has to say about this game.
Hi.
What you got?
Well, this game is very interesting. There's a lot of strategy that isn't necessarily apparent, especially I think in the 2-player game. I'm not really sure how it would change if you had more players. I'm sure it would change, but I don't know exactly how. I think in a 2-player game, it's nice because there's not tons to keep track of. It either I have the piece or my opponent has the piece, or the piece is in the underworld or still on the river. So you can kind of look around and take inventory really quickly of like, okay, if I pick up this piece, where am I at as far as like, do I have the majority? Will I be like absolutely in last place? Or is there still a lot of opportunity for me to collect more of this type from the river? So it's a nice, easy sort of thing to look around and sort of see where everything's at in a 2-player game. And I like that they've made everything just very approachable, like having the number of the number of points be equal to the number of pieces that there are in the set is really nice and streamlined and intuitive, I think. So it makes it really easy when you're looking around, to say like, okay, well, should I pick up this piece? Nick has 2 of them, I have 3 of them, and there's one right here. If I don't pick this up, it goes to the underworld, then we score, and I still have majority, So it makes it really easy to play the game, especially with 2 players. I think that it's an interesting game. It feels like players have a lot of control because you can go anywhere you want on the river. But to strategize to go to a place that's not going to end up screwing you later, or maybe giving your opponent too many points or that kind of thing, it's really interesting, like the timing of it, how the timing works out. I think in both of the games that we've played, this game and our practice game, I was really nervous that Nick was doing better than I was because he was sort of speeding along the track. But when it got down to like the last 7 points, it really became this game of like, okay, if I do this before this happens, then I won't give Nick too many points, but I'll be able to get some. And it really becomes this very interesting sort of puzzle. It's like that the whole way, but you can really feel it in like the last 7 to 10 points that you're trying to shed. And I've actually not thought that I was going to win for both games, and both games I have won. So it's been interesting. It's been really interesting.
But yeah, so definitely this is an interesting one, and one that's really simple. And plus, again, I said this multiple times already on the vlog, but you're cleaning up the game while you're playing it. Boom, mind blown. And I just think it's a really interesting, really cool, and it's subtle. It's not like you can forget about like you're actually cleaning up the game. You're just doing what the game is telling you to do, and it's to the point where it's like, okay, I'll just do that, and then all of a sudden when you're at the end, you have few pieces to clean up for. So I really like it, and I think if you want a simple, maybe kind of like those entry games for your family members or friends that don't really play board games, I would recommend this one. Yeah, so this is the vlog for Tutankhamun from 25th Century Games. We hope you all enjoyed it. And if you're not subscribed, get subscribed, you filthy animals. But yeah, so we'll talk to you guys next time on our next vlog. So toodles!